Check, check. Audio. 1, 2.
1, 1, 1, 2. 1, 2. Hey. Hey, hey. 1, 1, 2. Sounds a bit quiet, doesn't it?
Yeah, you are quite coming in.
1, 1, 1, 2.
We're not getting any audio in YouTube.
1, 2. Hey, hey.
Check, check. I'm definitely louder than you.
Yeah,
1, 2.
that's not
Now
good.
we got audio.
1, 2. Hey, hey. Hey. 1, 2. Nothing's changed, really.
No.
The hiss is from the laptop.
Yeah.
1, 2. Hey, hey. 1, 1, 1.
Check, check. Yeah, I'm still a lot louder than you.
1, 2. Hey. Hey, hey. 1, 1, 2. That's not good.
Is it worth checking you against the music?
1, 2. Hey. So that's it.
I'll turn myself down.
1. Hey. 1.
Yeah, you look quieter.
Every time you hear me cry, understand I'm free.
1, 1, 2. 1. Hey.
That's better.
1, 1, 1, 2.
Everyone will
Hey.
try not to fall,
1.
but I
Maybe
won't
turn the gain a little bit up on my mic. 1, 1, 2. Hey. 1.
Nobody can lie
1, 2. Hey.
anymore. The
1,
cracks
2.
in the wall.
Oh, we're clipping. The master is to them. We can't. 1. You see? 1, 1, 1, 2. Hey. Hey. 1, 2. 1. We don't have a limit or anything.
I shout for more than the books you
1, 2.
choose.
1, 1, 1. Hey.
So I walk.
Is that good
There's
or
nothing
quiet?
left
Or
to
too quiet?
lose.
1, 1.
I'd say it's quite a
Telling me
bit.
such lies just to make some
1, 2.
paper.
Hey. Hey. Hey.
Some
Okay.
paper.
Not gonna get that.
Okay.
1, 1, 2. Hey.
Instead of wasting time,
And how
you should try and
about
save us. No, no.
1, hey,
Even
hey, 2.
after all this time, I
1, 1, 2.
decide to breathe.
Okay, isn't it? I mean, this is this 1. Hey.
Every
1,
time
2.
you
Hey.
hear
Hey.
me cry,
1. That's with the mastering. Hold on.
understand I'm free.
1, 2. Hey. 1, 1, 1.
'Cause
Shouldn't be.
everyone will
Check, check.
try
1, 2.
to fall, but
Maybe take a bit of low end off your mic.
Okay.
How's the total output on Wirecast?
Check.
What?
How's the total output on Wirecast? Is it like a little low?
No, it's if anything, it's clipping. So it's the loudest as
Okay,
that
okay.
it can be.
I remind you to try not to talk over the music, of course.
I will, but not over the whole thing. I will talk only over like soloed parts, so it should be fine.
Do you want me to nudge the music down after the intro bit, just a fraction? Or
I think it will go down. It will go down to this.
nobody can lie
1, 2, hey,
anymore.
1. But I'm not. I'm never. I don't think I'm ever gonna play. I'm just gonna solo stuff.
right.
At least I'm gonna try.
Yeah.
Because it's important that when I solo the kick or stuff, it's still loud.
Yeah.
Okay. So Keith,
Yep.
let's see Yoad credits.
Uh, do you want to hear the changes I've made on the intro? about the poll section and see
Sure,
what.
why not? Let's do the intro. The loop into the logo into the splash.
Okay.
I fit everywhere I went. Last place. You want my time.
What is this?
One, two, hey, hey.
Did you want to do the intro?
Yeah, you okay me doing the intro, yeah?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So do the whole thing, like the
Yeah.
loop going quickly into the logo, immediately to the splash, start reading.
Okay. Oh, hang on. Sorry. That clicked by accident. I'll redo that. Hello, and welcome to Waves Open Sessions. My name is Keith, and I'm the moderator. I'm here working behind the scenes to help make sure everything runs smoothly. Today we're going to be having a masterclass with producer, mixer, and mastering engineer Yoad Nevo. But before we get started, I want to take a minute and go through the format of today's webinar for anybody that hasn't done one of these before. In just a minute, Yoad is going to open up a session to show you some of his unique approaches to producing a song. Yoad will be using headphones during the webinar to prevent the speakers from leaking into his microphone, and we encourage you to listen to the webinar with headphones or suitable monitors, not from laptop speakers, so you can get the best possible listening experience. Please feel free to let us know what you think of the webinar on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram using hashtag WavesOpenSessions during the webinar and after. Throughout the webinar, we'll be having an open Q&A. Feel free to submit any questions you have, and we'll try and answer as many of them as we can get to. You can send your questions in at any time, but you won't see them in the chat, as they'll first go to me and then I'll read them to Yoad one at a time. We've also got some questions we want to ask you, like, how do you work on music production? A poll is on the chat right now. I'll be posting other polls during the webinar so that you can let us know your opinions on the other subjects Yoad is discussing. And now, let me hand things over to our presenter for today. He's a London-based producer, mixer, and mastering engineer. His work can be heard on best-selling, critically acclaimed releases by the likes of Sia, Giggs, Goldfrapp, Bryan Adams, Jem, Pet Shop Boys, and many others. He's one of the best we've got. So please welcome Yoad Nevo to Waves Open Sessions.
Hi, and welcome to this open session. Today I'm going to be showing some advanced mixing and production techniques and how they're kind of intertwined. I'm going to be using this song titled Whiteboards by artist Nina Smith, who I signed recently. We wrote the music together, and Nina wrote the lyrics, and it's all about her experience growing up within the British public education system. Let's hear a bit of the song before we start. like when I... Yeah.
Green eyes, cut ties with a couple of friends. Short hair, I fit everywhere I went. Last place, two-faced, never knew about trends. I felt small, I crawl, but never reached the end. Now you want my time, now you're asking favors. I never want to lie, that's not my flavor.
Back to the loop. Okay.
Hello and welcome to Waves Open Sessions. My name is Keith Holmes and I'm the moderator. I'm here working behind the scenes to help make sure everything runs smoothly. Today we're going to be having a masterclass with producer, mixer and mastering engineer Yoad Nevo. But before we get started, I want to take a minute and go through the format of today's webinar for anybody that hasn't done one of these before. In just a minute, Yoad is going to open up a session to show you some of his unique approaches to producing a song. Yoad will be using headphones during the webinar to prevent the speakers from leaking into his microphone, and we encourage you to listen to the webinar with headphones or suitable monitors, not from laptop speakers, so you can get the best possible listening experience. Please feel free to let us know what you think of the webinar on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram using hashtag WavesOpenSessions during the webinar and after. Throughout the webinar, we'll be having an open Q&A. Feel free to submit any questions you have, and we'll try and answer as many of them as we can get to. You can send your questions in at any time, but you won't see them in the chat, as they'll first go to me, and then I'll read them to Yoad one at a time. We've also got some questions we want to ask you, like, how do you work on music production? A poll is on the chat right now. I'll be posting other polls during the webinar so that you can let us know your opinions on the subjects Yoad will be discussing. And now, let me hand things over to our presenter for today. He's a London-based producer, mixer, and mastering engineer. His work can be heard on best-selling, critically acclaimed releases by the likes of Sia, Giggs, Goldfrapp, Bryan Adams, Gem, Pet Shop Boys, and many others. He's one of the best we've got. So please welcome Yoad Nevo to Waves Open Sessions.
Hi, and welcome to Waves Open Sessions. Today we're going to be talking about some advanced mixing and production techniques, and I'm going to be using this song by artist Nina Smith, who I just signed recently. We wrote the music together, and Nina wrote the lyrics, and it's all about her experience within the British state education system. The title is Whiteboards. Let's hear some of the song.
Love friends, short hair, I fared everywhere I went. Last place, two-faced, never knew about trends. I felt small, I crawl, but never reached the end. Now you want my time, now you're asking favors. I never want to lie, that's not my flavor. Even after all this time, I decide to breathe. Every time you hear me cry, understand I'm free. 'Cause everyone will try not to fall, but I won't ignore the truth. Nobody can lie anymore. The cracks in the wall are proof. Whiteboards, class halls, everything brand new. Teach me.
Okay, so this is the song we're going to be talking about. As you can probably hear, it's a bit kind of, the whole approach is kind of lo-fi, gritty, and we'll start with the beat. So basically, if I remember correctly, that's how we started this song. I started programming a beat. Now, if I just solo the beat, you can hear that the snare is kind of skippy, and it's actually playing ahead of the grid. And that gives the whole tune kind of a skippy, almost uncomfortable feel, which I really like. Another quite important element of this song is the fact that all these tracks colored in this shade of grey are sidechained heavily. So let me solo some of them. So when I mean heavily, when I say heavily, I mean heavily, because without the sidechain they sound like that. And with, and that contributes to the whole feel of the song, again being kind of lazy and I don't know, skippy. I really like this groove. Now all of these tracks have a C1 compressor inserted on them, and this compressor is getting the sidechain from bus 63, which is feeding off an element synth. Basically, the element is playing the part, the exact part that the kick is playing. However, if I'll be using, and I have 3 kicks, we'll get 3 kick sounds, we'll get to that in a minute, but if I were to use one of the kick sounds to actually trigger the compressor on each of these tracks, then every change I would make to the kick sound will affect the way the sidechain reacts to that sound. Therefore, I just copied the part to a new track, and I'm actually running an element synth as a source sound for this sidechain. So the element actually sounds like that. It's just a sawtooth. Let's see how it sounds. Very simple. And what that allows me to do is to really shape the way the sidechain feels, and in turn the way the whole song feels. So let me just show you what I mean. So if I play with the decay time of the VCA envelope, you'll see that it affects all the tracks that are being sidechained by this synth. So now, if I lower the decay time, I'm basically compressing less, because what I'm generating will be a very short pulse, so which will sound something like that. And the longer the decay is, so now let's see how that affects the bass, for instance. So if I have that one soloed as well. One sec. Okay. So now I have these 2 solo. And if I switch it back to its original output, you'll see that it affects the bass. Also, I have the release time here, which prevents the compression to go out very quickly. However, if I make the decay time here longer, I get much more compression. And let's hear it in context.
All this time, I decide to breathe. Every time you hear me cry, understand I'm free. 'Cause
Now,
every
what I can also do, which is why I'm using the element and not another just sampler or another simple synth, because all I'm using is a sawtooth, is that I have the shape, and the shape affects the curve of the attack, the decay, and the release. So I can play with that, and that will have a tremendous effect as well.
Everyone will try not to fall, but I won't ignore the
So this is more logarithmic. So in fact, it makes the peak of the decay last longer. And the more linear I make it,
Whiteboards, class halls, all this time, I decide
so that affects the sound as well. Now I can also use the sustain,
every time you hear me cry, understand I'm free.
and that also changes the whole feel of the song.
Everyone will try.
So that's, now I know a lot of people use, well, different people use sidechaining in different ways, and basically there's one way of putting a dedicated sidechain plugin on each track, but then the problem is if you want to change the feel of the whole song, you have to go one by one and tweak that plugin. The other method is to use to route every sound that you want sidechained to a group and put the sidechain on that group. So you can change the sidechain and plugin, and it will affect all those instances, all those tracks that are routed to this group. But the problem with that is that when you come to export the parts or summing them outside the box, which is something that we'll talk about later, it's a problem. So therefore, for this song, I used this method of sidechaining. Do we have any questions with regards to that subject?
I've got a quick one to start off with. When you work on the production, do you know you're going to sidechain straight away? And if so, does that affect the instrumentation you do underneath, or is it?
That's an interesting question, because I think that these days most pop songs are heavily sidechained in one form or another. Now, when it's a 4 on the floor part, then it's easy to use just a dedicated plugin like Pumper. And I actually am using it on one of the tracks here, which does exactly that. Let me solo this part. It's just a kind of a delay. Now without it, and with that, even though this is not the part that the kick drum is doing, it's still very effective, like almost like a tremolo or something like that. And you can also notice that I'm playing with I'm automating the 4-man shift on this Logic plugin. So for something like that, that's absolutely fine. But like I said, the fact that I have a huge amount of control with one knob, in this case the decay knob on the element, over the feel of the whole song, is something that I really like.
Well, we got another question from Sametry here, saying, Can you give a quick insight on how you got the idea of using the element synthesizer? What pushed you towards that decision?
So, like I said before, since I'm using, since I can use, I mean, I'm not really using it in this instance, but I can use the shape of the decay, and that's very important. Now, that would be more effective if I had the release time of the C1 shorter, and I can show you what that does. Now, if I go, one thing which I really advise is to use the copy paste feature that is available on most DAWs these days. Although in all Waves plugins we have an undo and redo buttons, and you have 30 steps of undo, but it's really easy to just copy because that's the sound I'm using. So every time you're happy with something, but then you want to try out something, just press copy and you can always paste it. So now I'm going to make the release, so it's about 500 milliseconds. I'm going to make it as short as possible, just for the sake of this demonstration. Now, if I play the part and I make it really short, you can hear that it starts almost clicking because it follows the discrete cycles of the sawtooth, especially if I lower the octave. So you can hear it here very well. You can hear the actual cycles of the sawtooth pumping the C1 compressor. Let me show you. Which is a nice effect on its own, but that's not what I want. So I want this. That's why I'm using the higher decay time. So that's that. Any more questions?
Yeah,
on this
we got
topic?
a load of questions coming.
Okay.
in. Are all of your C1s identical, or are they customized for each track? And that was asked by Matthew S.
You know what? I don't even remember, but I would assume that once I get one, I would just drag it across. So I will open the mixer page and I will just drag it across using Alt to copy to all of them. Let's see if I'm right. Oh, the threshold. No, actually. So the answer is maybe.
That's a good answer.
Yeah.
I like that.
I just do it, as I go. So usually I would just drag it across however many tracks I want to be affected by the sidechain, and then you can still play with the threshold and the ratio to achieve different curves on different parts. Let's see what we have here. So we'll listen to the bass now. Let's see if we have more questions about sidechaining.
Okay, Mika's asked, do different compressors sidechain significantly different than others?
They are because the curve of the compression and the curve of the... So basically, the C1 is a hard knee compressor, which means that it will everything that's above the threshold will get affected immediately. Now there's some soft knee compressors like the one I'm using on the vocals, which is the Renaissance, the Arvox compressor, which is a soft knee compressor. So it starts really, really low. It's already starting to affect the signal very, very low, but it does it in a very gradual way. And that's why we don't have the ratio here. You can have a ratio with soft knee compression, but in this model we don't have it. It's a very smooth compression. It's a different type of compression. So I would say that between the C1 and the R channel, obviously there'll be a tremendous difference in sound. However, if I use the R channel in R comp, which is the Renaissance compressor mode, which is more similar to C1, the sound, if I be using this as sidechain, which I can from here, I can select what sidechain I want it to be using, then it would sound more similar to C1, but not identical. I can say that I really like the way the Logic native compressor sounds on sidechain, the VCA model. I like the way the Ableton Live compressor sounds on sidechain. That's a really good one as well. But the C1 is kind of solid, and it does, what it shows on the screen, which is very convenient for that.
Interestingly, bearing in mind that the majority of people watching this webinar do this job professionally alongside other jobs, we actually have a question which came up between us two earlier, and you explained to me. So Rico Dean has asked, why did you choose to put a compressor on each track instead of summing them all in a bus and put the sidechain compressor on that specific bus?
So I think I talked about it before. So when I do it in this way, so when I mix, I always make sure that the mix is ready to be exported as individual tracks. Because a lot of times I'm asked to to export the tracks for remixes, for live shows, to running on Ableton Live, or which is 9 out of 10 cases. So I make sure that it's ready to be exported. So now if I do this, I can just export everything and send off the tracks without thinking about it. Now if I had a subgroup and then I would put the sidechain on the subgroup, I wouldn't be able to separate the different tracks, and especially here where I have the bass and a lot of other synths affected by the sidechain, that would be not very useful to whoever I send the tracks to.
Okay, that's great. We got a load of questions that actually refer to topics that you're going to cover now, so I would suggest moving on.
Let's move on. So let's talk a little bit about the kick and the bass, which are very important in every song, obviously, with the beat. So kick, very simple. However, there's a few things that we can talk about here. So as you can see, the kick is made out of 3 different samples. And the first one, which is, I think that's basically the way I started the song, and that's how we started writing the song, with this kick, because it kind of inspired the whole lo-fi, skippy vibe. So now I'll just show you the other kicks in the song. That's one, and that's another one. That's like a sub. Now, as you can see, these two aren't processed in any way, and this one is only very mildly processed. So basically, in this case, the balance of the 3 kicks is what makes the kick sound, and then I can control the snappiness of it, and I can control the depth or the low end, and I can control the punch or the thump. So because I have a sub or something that's doing like a very low tone, I don't need this one to be very long. And this is something which is very important. If you can see, and here is, and that's something that I use a lot actually. A lot of people just go to the EQ and cut off the low end if it sounds too boomy, but in actual, and again, I immediately go to the copy because I'm going to change something, and on this on the EXS I don't have an undo button. So here I'm at 435 milliseconds. Now if I make it longer, you can hear all this low end. And I actually don't want this because I have already a sub kick and I don't want to tune that kick to the key of the song. I want it a lot because that's the original sample. The tone is very audible, but I don't want that. I just want the tuk tuk, the kind of mid-range. So you can see how, or you can hear rather, how effective is the VCA envelope in shaping the kick, so you don't really need an EQ. And I'm just using the Q1 here to just filter out the very low frequencies because again I don't need them. Now the smack attack allows me to shape basically the decay of the kick even further, so you can see what it does. Making it really short and tight, and then I can add the sub. On the sub, it's not really sub, but it's whatever it is. Here again, I'm going to copy the preset, the setup. Now, on the sub, I don't really need the attack because this is a kind of an 808 sample, but I don't want that click. I want it from something else, from the snappy kick in this case. So I'm actually bringing the attack right up. And again here, it's very long and I don't need all that. So, and this is tuned to the key of the song. Obviously it can't cover all the chords, so it's playing the fifth, which works on it's only 4 chords in this song, and it works on all of them except for the first one. Now, and then we have the snappy kick, which is just a sample, nothing whatsoever. I'm just filtering the high frequencies a little bit. So whenever I'm using samplers or synths, I would always go to basically sculpt the source sound rather than putting loads of plugins on it, because sometimes it's not needed. Now I have a very coherent kick. A lot of the times I would use just a single sample rather than layers, but in this case, since I started with this one, there's no way I can get all the elements that I need for this song from this single sample, because there's no top end on it. The bottom end is not really the way I want it to sound. So that's why I work with these 3 samples. And the bass, let's move on to the bass. So basically the bass is also a sample. It's actually a sample of a looped 808 kick, a very long one, and it's looped and distorted. Now, what I like about this bass is, since it's looped, then every note would basically play the sample, and the loop would occur at different rate. So this is what it sounds like. So very, very fast on the high note. And none of these rates are actually related to the song BPM or anything like that. But, I mean, they do sound like nice together, and I think that this adds a little bit of, I don't know, texture, and it sounds a little bit more interesting. And of course we have the sidechain on top of that. So you hear that how the bass kind of raises its head after every kick, which almost makes these loops in time with the song. It's like forces them to be in sync in a way. So, do we have any questions?
We do indeed. Let me just scroll back for a second. A couple of good ones on the kick drum. First off, do you tune, this is from Juan Mark, apologies if I pronounced that wrong. Do you tune every kick or just the sub kick?
Usually, I try not to mess with the tuning of a sample that I choose unless it's really getting in the way. So it's not that I would, because sometimes you have to tune it by 4 tones or and it just becomes ridiculous how thin or like woolly or kind of, because you get the Foreman shift with the tuning as well.
Yeah.
So I just try to ignore this altogether, and only in cases where so if I use a single kick rather than layers, and I can get away with tuning it to a note that will be at least in the key of the song, usually preferably the root note or the fifth, then I would do it if it's like 1 or 2 semitones. Okay. And then I will compensate for the difference in EQ. But if I don't have to, I wouldn't do it.
Okay, well that actually leads really well on to a question from Andy, who asks, is blending 3 kick sounds a go-to method for getting a kick sound for you?
Well, it depends. It depends. If I really find a good kick, you know what? When I start working on a song, usually I would start with the beat, and obviously sometimes I would grab an acoustic guitar or piano sound or something like that. But when it's this type of song, then I would usually start it with the beat, and then I just go by intuition. I have here at my disposal 16 instances of EXS. Each one contains 128 samples, so I have 128 samples of kick drums here, which I can flick between snares, hi-hats, and so on. So I just go do, and this is something that we can cover in a different Waves Open Sessions session, basically, because that's very interesting. And even before I had that, that's just a controller for this method. I just have samples of like the whole keyboard of kicks, and then another one of snares, and then another one of hi-hats and claps and so forth. So I just go until I find one that inspires me, or that leads me into something, because it's all about getting an idea. Because it's like with Nina, we just completed the whole album which we wrote together. She brought in actually some of her own songs, but I think the majority of the songs we started here. And when you sit in the studio and you book a writing session, what do? So you have to break the ice. You have to do something. So usually I would just, and I don't want to go through like millions of kick samples and this and that. So I just have a few that I know. Not a few, I mean, I'm talking about thousands, but I know them kind of well. So I would just, it's not that I would say, oh, I have this idea in my head and I'll look for this kick. No, it's the other way around. I would just start, and then I can always change the kick sound. But by doing it that way, it leads me to writing a song during that process, then it's great. Who cares about the kick? And even in this case, I started with this kick, but it's not the right kick, I mean, on its own, so therefore I added 2 more samples to it. However, if it was, then I would probably use it and just as a single one.
Okay, that's good advice. We've got a question from Marcio. What is the name of the controller that you addressed the ESX 24 samples?
So I'm using this BeatStep Pro. I'm using. I really like the sequencer on it because it's really inspiring and you can get like really cool beats. But it's just a controller, so it doesn't generate any sound. What I did is I basically created a logic environment which allows me to control each pad, to transpose it, basically. So I can basically have 128 notes triggering from that pad, and snares and claps and hi-hats and whatever. I can do it with any other controller. I do like this one because it has the sequencer, and I really like the sequencer on it. But it's all about the setup in the environment, which is maybe something, if there's interest in that, that's something we can cover in a different episode.
The world famous Yoad environment, yes.
And Keith, yeah, we together we devised a really interesting environment, but that's a different subject that basically allows us to control all the analog synths here, and there's very many of them, which allow it. I mean, the Minimoog and the SH101 and the MS, the Polyvox obviously don't allow it, but each synth that actually responds to CSEX or NPRN or controller data, we have a dedicated environment for, and this is all controlled by this, and the settings of the placement of the knobs is consistent. So this is always the cutoff. This is all. So, but this is for a different episode.
Okay. Talking of new subject, we've got quite a lot of questions on vocals. So
okay, yeah, let's move on
to
to vocals. Sure. What are the questions?
I will come back to you with that.
Okay.
If you start off.
Lead vocal. Quite processed, as you can see. One of the things that I wanted to achieve here is the grittiness and the lo-fi, but I always like my vocals kind of polished and bright at the same time. And the way I achieved that in this track was actually by using this weird effect. which on its own doesn't sound very nice. And it's actually a funny way to start a discussion about vocal sound because, but still. So I'm using 3,600 BPM times 2. So that's almost like, that's above 7,000 BPM. So that's fast. Again, let me copy this. So where is you? Where is the, okay.
Green eyes, cut ties with a couple of friends. Short hair, I fit.
So this is a square wave modulating the amplitude. That's all it is, but at this frequency it creates kind of a tonal aliasing, which is almost FM-y in its character because we're talking about audio frequencies here. So that's one thing. But let's mute that for a second and just concentrate on the actual vocal sound. So first thing I always do, well, there's a bit of tuning, but I mean, Nina is very accurate, so there's not much.
Eyes, cut ties with a couple of friends.
Not much going on here.
Hair, I fit everywhere I went.
So that's that. But apart from that, the one thing I always pay a lot of attention to is the sibilance, and especially because I use a lot of compression on the vocal, and which tends to bring them out and to make them very loud and piercing. So I take care of that before I do any other processing. I mean, obviously the tuning is not going to affect the sibilance in any way.
Green eyes, cut ties with a couple of friends. Short hair, I fit.
So this controls the S's and the T's.
Never knew about trends.
And then I compress quite a lot
but never reached the end.
with the CLA2A, which is based on the LA2A compressor, which I really like. And this is kind of
cut ties with a couple of
the level changes that it produces are kind of transparent in a way, unless you really, smack it. But the harmonic distortion and the color of the original unit, which is very well modeled on this plugin, is just beautiful. So
green eyes, cut ties
it's
with
difficult
a couple
to
of friends. Short hair,
compare because
everywhere I went.
so if I would lower it again.
Last place, two-faced, never knew about trends. I felt small, I'd crawl, but never reached.
So it sounds a little bit
cut ties with a couple of friends.
one-dimensional.
Short hair, I fit everywhere I went.
And this one adds a lot of depth and sweetness
never knew about trends.
to. So I have this plugin on, I would say, almost every vocal track, every lead vocal track, because I just love it. Even if I wouldn't be using a lot of compression, like in this case, I mean, in the chorus there's a lot of compression because she goes up.
All this time,
Sorry.
I decide to breathe.
So there's a lot more compression here.
Every time you hear me cry.
But even here, it does a really, really good job. And then comes the real kind of big compression in the R channel. Now, since this is a writing session and then it turned into a mix session, and it's, you know, a lot of the times, actually every time that I get oh, okay, sorry. Oh, sorry. So basically, every time I get mixing stems, which is something that I do a lot. This is probably my main kind of the main thing that occupies my time in the studio. Then I get them prepped and cleaned up, and Keith knows all about that. But in this case, it's something that I started here, which turned out to be a finished product, and I didn't even bother with that. Obviously, it's all good and fine and cleaned and everything, but it just evolved, because a lot of times I would be writing a song and getting to a pretty advanced stage with a song pretty quickly in a day or two, but a lot of the times the song will not even get used, because we would write a better one, or we would just leave it, or get stuck with the lyrics or something like that. So, you know, so there's no point in prepping it. This song we really liked, and it's not even a mix session as such. So usually I start my mixes fresh, on a fresh session. All the tracks are cleaned and checked and tuned, and if there are any samples to replace or anything like that, then it will all be done. But this is on productions that someone else did, and then I would just get the tracks and get it prepped, and then start mixing fresh and really get a vibe very quickly, because I don't have to deal with all the technical issues. But here, since I recorded it, we just recorded a few takes, we did it very quickly. I think we wrote and recorded this song in a few hours, and then, so there's not really a mix session on this song, but I probably spent more time on the mix of this song than the time it took to write it. I mean, to write it, yeah, and to record it. So I probably spent, like, I don't know, a day and a half altogether. But I didn't even bother with cleaning it up. I mean, all the edits are fine, but I just use an expander to
Green eyes, cut ties with a couple of friends. Short hair, I fit
instead of editing
everywhere
each
I
word.
went.
Again,
Last place.
this is kind of a lo-fi song, and it's not to say that I want to have any clicks and noises, and there aren't any, but this is just how it evolved. So I'm using gate, this is expander gate, which I really like on the Renaissance, on the R channel, and I use a lot of compression. So, but since we have just one common gain reduction meter, so this shows the gain reduction of the expander and the compressor at the same time. So I'm going to lose that for a second.
Green eyes, cut ties with a couple
and
of friends.
show how much we compress. So we compress, I don't know,
everywhere I went.
15
Last
to
place,
20 dB even. I don't care, just sounds good. And I use very short attack time. Now if I had it like that, it would be spitting a little bit, because it would take time for the compression to kick in. And also, as you can see, I have 9 dB of makeup gain, because I'm compressing so much. I need to boost the output. And if I had a longer attack time, then the vocal would come in very loud and then get compressed, and I will get this. And so I put the attack time on 0, but even then I use the transient the Transax, which is a transient processor, to reduce even the remaining attacks.
Green eyes,
you can see
cut ties with a couple of friends.
it just goes over.
Short hair.
So without it, it sounds.
Green eyes, cut ties with a couple of friends. Short hair. Green eyes,
Which-
cut ties with a couple.
Which basically makes the compression more audible. So you get this, you notice that it's compressed, but with this on, it sounds a lot smoother.
Green eyes, cut ties with a couple of friends.
I mean, at least in context. Obviously now it sounds very compressed, which it is, and I like it, but with this on, I can get away with much more compression. And then I'm adding some, and that's after the compression. I have the EQ, I can change the order, but I always like to have my EQ after the compression, because I don't want any changes I make to the EQ to affect the amount of compression. So I put the compression first and the EQ after, and then I'm filtering out a lot of the low frequencies, and I'm adding quite a lot of the highs. And then I always, again, I'm just going to copy this. I always try to find one frequency which is not even very pleasant, but very effective.
Green eyes, cut ties with a couple of friends. Short hair, I fared everywhere I went. Last
And then-
place, two-faced, never knew about trends.
And then I add a little bit of
I
it, and
felt
that adds a
small.
lot
I'd crawl, but never reach the end.
of presence.
Now you
Because
green eyes.
there are some presence in the high frequencies, but I find that most of the presence actually in vocals comes from the high mid or mid range in general. So that's something that I really like. And now, because I'm boosting quite a bit of highs, I want to control the sibilance again. So I have a second de-esser inserted.
Green eyes, cut ties with a couple of friends. Short hair, I fared
Now-
everywhere I went. Last place, two-faced.
I know that this sounds, when soloed, it sounds quite processed, and but in context, it sounds quite good.
Green eyes, cut ties with a couple of friends. Short hair.
Now, if I play it
I
without the
fared
de-essing,
everywhere I went. Green eyes, cut ties with a couple of friends. Short hair.
you can
I fared everywhere I
you can hear how loud they become, because there's a lot of processing going on. And on top of that, I'm adding a bit of excitement.
Green eyes,
High
cut
frequency.
ties with a couple of friends.
That's without.
Short hair, I fared everywhere I went.
So I love
Last place,
the oral exciter. I used to use the hardware. It's amazing on vocals, on piano, on acoustic guitar, sometimes on snare as well, and actually sometimes on bass, especially with the old trick of having it on ascend before the AMS 1580 harmonizer. This is something that we can maybe show later if we have time. How much time do we have? Wow. Okay. So, and that's now with the vocal effect, this weird kind of audio frequency AM modulation.
green eyes, cut ties with a couple of friends.
You can hear it's very subtle.
Short hair, I fared everywhere I went. Last place,
Almost sounds like a
never knew about trends.
double or
I felt
harmony or
small.
something weird going
I'd
underneath.
crawl, but never reach the end.
And then what I tend to do when I get to the chorus is just duplicate the track and then I'm free to use different effects without having to engage automation at all. I mean, I do have some level automation here, not even in the choruses. This is just sending it to a plate, to H reverb at certain places. And you can hear that there's this pumping effect on the tail of H reverb, and it just happening on these long notes. But I also have this short delay on the vocal.
Even after all this time, I decide to breathe. Even after all this time, I decide to breathe. Every time you hear me cry, understand I'm free. 'Cause everyone will try.
Let's see what we have on the outro.
Is it too late to save us? Is it too late to teach us now?
Yeah, pretty much the same. Not much automation at all, actually. Don't need that.
Education is dangerous when they tell us to just look down. Look down, look down. Ooh. Is it too late to save us? Is it too late to teach us now?
Cool. Do we have any interesting questions?
Yeah, we got loads. We do. We have loads. Sorry about that. Okay. We got two questions here which I think really correspond with each other. The first is from R. Fitzgerald 97, who says, do you have any tips for recording high quality vocals to begin with? But then added to the question from JP, was there any hardware used when recording the lead vocals, as in compressors, EQs and pre's?
Well, you know, I know people are talking about this preamp and this preamp and this compressor and this, and I'm very lucky to have 60 of them. This desk sounds so good that sometimes I think it's not fair how good it sounds. When you open a mic or an acoustic guitar on a vocal or drums or anything, it just sounds so good. I just love the sound of these mic preamps. I love the sound of the compressor, and I do use it while recording because it's kind of transparent, but it's not. I mean, in terms of the change, the way it changes or controls the level, it's quite transparent because you can see that the waveform is quite consistent. You know, it's not overly compressed. Obviously, that's the way it's recorded, and I never record too hot. You can see that between the verse and the chorus, it just makes it sit right. I don't use EQ when I record. I rather do it while mixing, but again, it sounds so bright and so clear and so crisp that I don't feel that I need to record EQ. Obviously guitars, sometimes acoustic guitars, I would use the EQ on, and on drums, like on the overheads and stuff, but on vocals I tend not to, because also it may sound better with a bit of like this beautiful Neve top end on, and even a bit of high pass filtering, but if I want to come back another day and change one word here or re-record a chorus or something like that. I don't want to start doing recall sheets and stuff like that for every recording session that I do here. So that therefore I just don't use the EQ on vocals, because that's the one thing that usually would come back and record the vocals in another day and stuff. Wasn't the case here, but I just don't use EQ when recording vocals in general.
Okay, it is a beautiful sounding desk, I gotta say.
Yes.
We got a good question from JG. I noticed the chorus voices are very mono, but all the production is very spread in the panorama. Why is this choice made?
Because it's not that type of song that requires like lush BVs and beautiful harmonies. It's kind of, and actually there's a lot of things I wanted to talk about in this song, so I guess we will have to have a part 2 of this session. I want to talk about summing in the box versus on an analog desk, about the mastering chain that I use, when I use it, and why. I mean, this is obviously not the final mastering processing, and you can hear on SoundCloud, and I think the link is somewhere, the actual final mix and mastering of this song. But there's a lot of stuff that we just don't have the time to cover, and one of the subject is the stereo imaging and all that. So I guess we'll do it next time.
Okay, I'm going to give you a really quick question from Ryan Latz. How do you make that glide in the bass? Really distinctive glide sound.
I'm not sure what you're referring to. Let's see if we have some. Is it just pitch bend or yeah? Yeah, it's just pitch bend.
Green eyes, cut ties with a couple of friends.
Nothing. Oh yeah, you can see it here. Nothing fancy. So basically, you set the pitch. Usually, it defaults to two semitones up and down. But here I set it to on EXS, which is something I really love. You can set the pitch bend up separately from the pitch bend down. So I set it to 1 octave going down, and that's. So I just play that in. I don't know if there are many edits. Always the tricky part is to make sure that there's a note when starting the new region, so it resets. Yeah, always the simple things.
Sorry, I may have missed out there. What did you use to automate that in? Was it the...
No, I just
controller?
played it in. Just played the pitch bend.
Nice. As you say, always the simple things. Okay, we're going to go to the polls for a second. Quick question for you. When you work on a track, kind of what's the first instrumentation you tend to work on, or does it differ?
You mean mix? When I start mixing, or when I
when you start producing or mixing? The 64% here would start with the drums. 28% would go with other instruments, and only 8% would go with the vocals. I mean, would that?
I suppose it refers to mixing.
Yeah, I guess so.
It's I would say that pretty much represents the ratio of how I do it. So usually I would start with the drums. Sometimes I would start with because usually when I get a mix, I just open up faders and I listen to it, and then I compare it to the rough mix, which I have running at the top of the page, and I can A/B it very quickly. And this is something that I'm going to show later as well, like in one other on another episode of Waves Open Sessions. So rarely with the vocal. Sometimes I do actually. If the vocal sounds funny and I happen to solo it and it sounds weird, or I don't know whether intentional or not, then I would just put some plugins on it and get it kind of more present, and then effectively it means that I started mixing with the vocal first, but usually I start with the drums.
Yeah, it's interesting because chatting to you about things like this, you've always said you do what needs to be done.
Yeah.
You know, and that's something I've really learned from you.
I think you have to be methodical, but you have to allow a lot of room for creativity, a lot of space for creativity, because that's what it's all about. It's music. It's it's not accounting. I'm sure some people can be very creative with accounting as well. I wish I knew them, but yeah, it's all about vibe and it's playing. It's an instrument, and whether it's a desk, whether it's a guitar, whether it's the screen, which is a little bit less attractive, but it has its own benefits. But it's an instrument, and you just do stuff. And it's in the same way that with guitar, you learn chords, and that's the basics. And then you change it. Then you do whatever. Then you change it to open tuning or whatever, or you play however you do it. But so you need to have the basic, and once you have the basic understanding of how things work, and you make sure that it's recorded well, and that applies to when I get something to mix. So I make sure that it's prepared well, as if it was recorded well, even if it isn't. So the gains are all fine. There's no stuff out of phase, and the timing is correct, and then you can really start mixing and just doing stuff intuitively.
Yeah, good advice. Great advice. I just want to read out the results of the How Do You Create Sidechain Effect, and manually wins it 68% over 32%
Wow,
who like a dedicated plugin. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I'm quite surprised by that. I've got to be honest. Feel like wrapping it up?
Yeah, absolutely. Big thank you to Nir and Sam from Waves, who made this possible, and for all the IT guys that are controlling this from around the world, basically. And a huge thanks to Keith Holmes,
Thank
who
you.
is a friend and a good engineer in his own right.
Too kind.
Who was directing the cameras and reading the questions and mixing the mics and everything.
So apologies for all the mistakes, the mispronunciations, the wrong screenshots.
All good. I enjoyed it very much, and so this means that we will have to have a part 2 of this session, and you'll be notified. So thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you, Yoad, for such an awesome webinar. We hope you all enjoyed it. If you like this webinar and would like to see more open sessions like these, please let us know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to Waves' YouTube channel for more advanced tutorials and future product releases. Thank you all for joining us. Hope to see you at the next Waves Open session.